Well, good morning, Buckeye Nation. It's What We Learned, Buckeye Breakdown with Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated. Just about 24 hours after the Ohio State Buckeyes knocked off the Nebraska Cornhuskers. It's a chance to reflect on a victory Sunday, which is always a lot more fun than a head-scratching Sunday in which you came off a loss. Ohio State has an unbelievable amount of depth and talent in the wide receiving core. I'm not sure we learned that yesterday, but boy, it definitely shone through with Jaxon Smith-Njigba's monster record-breaking day. The defense played incredibly well. And how about the Big Ten? If the Big Ten West isn't the most inspiring and maybe intriguing is the better way to phrase it. If that's not the most intriguing division in college football, it's certainly one of the top couple. Four teams that are 4-2 and teams that aren't 4-2 that are very capable of knocking off teams in the top half of that division. If Ohio State is going to run the table, I genuinely don't know if I have any idea who they're going to play in Indianapolis, and that's awfully fun to think about. We'll project some of that here as we move forward. It's What We Learned on a Sunday morning. Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness.
This is the question on a lot of people's minds here.
Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. Happy Victory Sunday, Buckeye Nation. Ohio State 26, Nebraska 17 yesterday for a seventh consecutive Buckeye win. It certainly has gotten much, much better after where Ohio State was through 2 weeks. Ohio State is certainly looking like a team that can both run away from its opposition and grind out tough wins as they have the last couple of weeks. I'm Brendan Gulick, along with Coach Tommy Zagorski. If you're new to the podcast, thanks for joining. We certainly would appreciate it if you subscribe to our content on YouTube, or if you're listening after the fact on Spotify or wherever you like to get your podcast. We appreciate your support there as well. BuckeyesNow.com is your home for all things Ohio State. Coach, yesterday, certainly not a beautiful win aesthetically, and yet there were some eye-popping numbers. C.J. Stroud, honestly, I'm going to say this, somehow threw for 405 yards. I honestly didn't think that number was reachable until I saw the final box score. Jaxon Smith-Njigba had more than half those receiving yards by himself. He played unbelievable, breaking Ohio State's single-game receptions record and nearly breaking the receiving yards record. And the defense had another really good day. They gave up two big plays, but other than that, I thought really performed well, especially when they were needed to. So the Buckeyes draw up enough of what they needed to on the road to come away with a win. Again, it wasn't pretty, but they got it done. And I think this time of year, winning is really just what matters, the be-all and end-all of it.
Absolutely, Brendan. When you wake up after a victory in November, you feel pretty good about yourself no matter how you get to that victory. The Buckeyes yesterday weren't, I don't want to use the word sexy because, this is a family-friendly show, but it wasn't a fan-based win. What I mean is that the fans of Ohio State didn't walk away from that just drooling, going, wow, what a great win for them, and great win for Ohio State. But what did happen yesterday is we saw the maturity of a defense. And Matt Barnes, he has done a phenomenal job of just taking over this defense, and the humility that we alluded to weeks ago about him continues to exude through that defense. It's players taking on responsibilities that they traditionally don't take on. It's giving the ability to say, this isn't just me. It's Kerry Combs. It's Al Washington. It's, Larry Johnson. It's this entire defensive staff. And it's a group of kids that are buying in, that are growing up right before our eyes. One of the big stats of yesterday's game, I think that we don't take back is, you and I both know Tommy Eichenberg, and at the beginning of the season, it was hard for us to look at him and see him playing, linebacker for Ohio State. He's starting to fill into this defense. It's the second game in a row that he's had multiple tackles for loss. He's playing behind a defensive line that is playing outstanding football right now. I mean, the maturity of Zach Harrison and Tariq Smith, like their legacy with this defensive line, it has been so much fun to watch these guys pin their ears back and use their hands and go play. And as those guys grow and those guys develop, it just takes so much time and so much issues off of the secondary. Ronnie Hickman, who we thought was going to be a role player at the beginning of the year, has just blossomed into this nickel safety linebacker player that really does everything for this defense. Bryson Shaw, I mean, at the beginning of the year, I go, how could he play at Ohio State? I didn't think he could play at Mickey Mouse Tech. He's playing better football. And Denzel Burke, at the beginning of the year, we talked about how great of a player he's going to be and for this Buckeye defense. And he continues week in and week out to grow. Yesterday, when the TV announcer said that he got hurt on the opening drive, my heart stopped and I go, no. Sevyn Banks is coming along. I mean, really, this defense is just starting to play so much better. And then, we talked about it yesterday. Steele Chambers, another guy, humility. Steele Chambers comes in as this top-rated, running back. Who's not to say Steele Chambers couldn't be the number 2 running back at Ohio State right now behind, Travion Henderson. But what does Steele Chambers do? He gets to Ohio State. They say, hey, we're going to move you to linebacker. Oh, awesome, guys. Great. Cool. Coach Alfred, thanks for recruiting me. Okay, I'm going to move over to the other side of the football. And when he does it with grace. He does it phenomenally. And really, he's starting to play really, really good football. It's been fun to watch these guys. And then everybody gets into the portal, and everybody's got to hit in the portal. And yesterday, the Buckeyes hit big in the portal with Noah Ruggles. Noah Ruggles' ability to just continuously get close and make these field goals is outstanding. He comes from Steinbrenner High School in North Carolina. I don't know if it has any affiliation.
Oh no, did we lose you? I know where you're going with this. No affiliate. You don't know if it has any affiliation with the Steinbrenner family. I'm not sure either. I hope everything's okay. Well, I'll tell you what. In the meantime, while he gets that worked out, we'll continue on here on our own. I think it's a great point, though, that he was starting to make about, the impact signing of Noah Ruggles out of the transfer portal. We're talking about a kicker, right? And how often do you find yourself leaning on your kicker? I mean, it's just not very often that you're in a position where you feel like, you need your kicker to execute for you. Certainly not at Ohio State. And I think, there's a legitimate probability that Noah Ruggles was the one of the 5 most impactful transfers in the country this year. I mean, maybe Jamison Williams has been a little bit more impactful down in Alabama. I'm sure there are a couple of others that aren't immediately coming to mind. Alabama picked up a linebacker that the Buckeyes wanted in 2020. But I mean, to have a kicker come to Ohio State, a guy, not recruited by the Buckeyes, and 2 weeks in a row. This is the first time, if you haven't heard this is the first time in Ohio State football history that you have a kicker who 2 weeks in a row connects on 4 field goals. And it wasn't just that he kicked 4 field goals. To me, it had a lot more to do with the fact that the Buckeyes needed him to kick those 4 field goals. In a pair of 9-point wins, kicking field goals becomes that much more important, which is such a weird thing to think about with college football, because we're kind of mentally ingrained to think that, if you're not scoring touchdowns, you're not going to win games. And a lot of times college football can be a shootout. And so it's hard to, it's hard to get away from the thought process that sometimes settling for field goals can be okay. But Noah Ruggles the last couple of weeks has been huge, especially as the Buckeyes have not been great in the red zone. And when Coach is able to hop back on here, we'll chat with him about this. Actually, perfect. I think he's come in right at this time. We got you back,
Brendan. I apologize. One of the beauties of living with a 10-month-old is sometimes they like to crawl around when you're not with them. And when they crawl around, they unplug routers. So I found out in the other room that my beautiful 10-year-old daughter decided to do that. So she
10-month-old daughter, not 10-year-old daughter.
10-month-old daughter. Sorry, if I had a 10-year-old daughter that was crawling around and knocking out routers, I'd be really
That's
nervous.
okay.
But nonetheless, I know I went on this big thing, but Noah Ruggles
You're
hitting
good.
on
Noah
Noah Ruggles, which was really exciting. What a great get for the Buckeyes. I'm sure, Brendan, you covered it. But one of those things that when you look at a team like Ohio State, knew they were going to be young, Ryan Day and his staff went out, decided to go get guys that they thought could help the team and really ask guys to take on new roles from a coaching standpoint, from a player standpoint, from everywhere in the facility. And it's starting to manifest into gritty wins on the road against a very talented 3-7 Nebraska team. And yes, I know on paper, 3-7.
Sure.
It's the best 3-7 team probably, in the last 10 years in college football. I mean, these guys play in every single game. They're gritty. They're just not finishers. And that's where Nebraska fans are going to be very upset about Scott Frost. They're going to continue to be really upset, saying, why? And then they're going to have to watch highlights of him on Husker Nation and all those other good things to kind of regenerate and get excited about what they are. But from that standpoint, I think it's important. It's really important that the Buckeyes continue to grow and continue to look at what they really took away from this Ohio State win in Lincoln that was sometimes by the national media is not going to look at as this great win. But I think for us, Ohio State, they're going to look at the facility. They're going to say, wow, our defense played well. Our special teams played outstanding. And realistically, the offense was off today.
Sure.
This is really the last two times that C.J. Stroud has thrown the ball 50-plus times. The Buckeyes have scored under 30 points. It was yesterday against Nebraska, and then earlier in the season against Oregon. It goes to show you what I was screaming yesterday into the post game: the ability to run the football, and that's where you have this elite running back in Travion Henderson. You have this offensive line that at the beginning of the year we were putting on this pedestal as the greatest offensive line ever concocted. And now they've had some humble pie. So it's going to be time to get back to it. Time to get into that Crowler sled and start driving that thing around the field tomorrow when those guys get back to practice and really give them the ability to kind of get back to their roots. I think also they're going to be ridden like dogs the rest of the week. And I think they're going to come out against Purdue like ready to go. There's too much pride in that group. Thayer Munford's an incredible leader. He's going to get those guys to come with him. I know we talked about DeJuan Jones was not able to warm up and get ready to go at the beginning of the game. But also, Brendan, I mean, I don't know. I watch National Geographic. I don't see hunting animals, lions and cheetahs and bears oh my stretching and warming up and doing calisthenics. I know my friend Bob Wiley, we've got the boys will cover, don't take it over Normandy. They get stretched. The share rosary, they went out there, they scaled Normandy. So from that standpoint, I think whatever you see, it's going to be interesting, going forward, whether or not this offensive line is going to embrace this and kind of be that redheaded stepchild that really drives Ohio State forward in these late months of November.
You kill me. When you were kind of getting reconnected, I was talking about Noah Ruggles and the fact that Ohio State's had to lean on him. It's not just, hey, the kicking game it's there and you use it and whatever. These last couple of weeks, the kicker has made an enormous difference. And in college football nowadays, we're just not used to seeing that part of the game be particularly meaningful. I mean, how often do you watch a good college football game where if you're not scoring touchdowns, you feel like you're falling behind when you're in the red zone? I mean, a perfect example last night, Tennessee and Kentucky. It was a shootout. Though I don't think I would call those two elite offensive teams. They're good. I don't think they're elite offensive teams. And if you start settling for field goals in a game like that, you get left behind. And frankly, if you're playing against Ohio State, so far this year, if you're settling for field goals, you're getting left behind. Or yesterday, Nebraska, if you're missing field goals, you're getting left behind. I don't know how you snap hook a couple of 30-yard field goals. That was brutal. But I say all that to give proper credence to Noah Ruggles, who I think is probably one of the top 5 transfer pickups in the portal, this season, just based on performance so far. And by the same token, man, Jesse Mirko has also made such a big impact for the Buckeyes. In the same light, we joked a couple weeks ago when Mirko had a huge game, and a couple of our fans said, how many of you guys didn't know the name of the punter before he had that game that day? And it's both funny, but for a lot of people, is probably true. Being the punter for the Buckeyes is a lonely job. You don't get a whole lot of opportunities throughout the course of the season, but when you get them, you're expected to execute. And, Ryan Day and his staff always talk about special teams and how important it is, especially for younger guys. You have to earn your stripes. And, if you want to play offense or defense, you're going to play special teams first, and we're going to see what you're made of. They take a lot of pride in those units. But I think in the grand scheme of things, those things can get a little bit overlooked in the fan or media realm. And Ohio State special teams units, I think, have been very, very good this year.
They have been, and that's where it yields into these great players that you're seeing really on Saturday. You're seeing these guys play. You're seeing them execute. You're seeing those guys earn their role. And one of the things is Ryan Day talks about that. And every coach in America says, our special teams is where guys earn it, da-da-da-da-da-da. Jaxon Smith-Njigba is our punt returner.
Yeah.
Chris Olave covers kicks for the Buckeyes. You're talking about elite day one type NFL prospects that are running down on special teams, that are doing the dirty work, because why? It's part of the culture. These guys come into this facility. They're the highest rated players everywhere in America. Yeah. Everybody wants these guys. The guys that are there, they've been recruited by this guy and this guy and this guy. They have the cell phone numbers of every big-time college football coach in America. They've been told from the beginning of 8th grade that they're going to be God's gift to football. You're the greatest player in this state. You're the greatest player in this state. You're the greatest player in this program's history. And the list goes on and on. Somehow, some way, Ryan Day has cultivated this culture in Columbus that not only celebrates the athleticism and the greatness that these young men bring in this facility, but also it strips them of their stars. It strips them of their accolades. It strips them of all these different things they have going into the facility so they can contribute to something greater than themselves, which is a victory on Saturday. And I think when you see that and you see a team going forward, that's when you know you have the right coach. And I know Ryan Day took a lot of heat yesterday with play calling responsibilities. And, he's not calling this, he's not calling that. I know this. If you're sitting at home or you're sitting at your job, whatever it may be, you're 9-to-5er, and your wife texts you, hey, do you want to have meatloaf tonight? And your wife makes the cruddiest meatloaf in America. Are you going to keep going, hey, I want that meatloaf. Come on, honey, bring that meatloaf in. Bring that meatloaf in. Bring that meatloaf in. If that meatloaf's a 2-yard run, you're not going to go with it. And she goes, yeah, maybe we'll order pizza from the local place. And pizzas, that's your shot play. And you're like, I want that on the way home. I think that's really where you're seeing this right now. Or, hey, we go with Chipotle or whatever it may be, whatever your family, gets excited for.
Chipotle better be at the top of the playbook. I mean, if we're gonna be doing this,
at least with salsas, and we'll talk about Brendan's.
Oh my God!
As we go into it, Brendan's the Scott Frost of burrito makers, but we'll get into that at another time. But what I think about this, and I look at, and I think that's really interesting going forward, is that you can't fault Ryan Day for going with something that doesn't work, and when it's not working, you keep pounding it. Here's where Ohio State fans have been really upset. If Ohio State didn't convert on any of those long third downs because they said, hey, we're just going to run the football and try to get the clock out of it. Right now, Ryan Day would be considered passive and not aggressive and looking at, we were cheating on our nails, waiting to see whether or not Adrian Martinez was going to turn the football over on a last-minute drive to go in and potentially beat Ohio State. He called that pass play because why? He knew the coverage. He knew what Nebraska was going to do. And when you watch the game film, not one, but 2 receivers are running wide open that were part of the progression for C.J. Stroud. If for some reason the offensive line was able to hold up just a hair longer, and I get it. I've coached offensive line. I played offensive line. There are times where you get that pass call in and you're like, come on. Can we just
Here we go.
I've got to go. Pass protection's hard. It's a hard deal. Now, it's the only position in all of sports that you ask somebody to let them go forward at you, and you have to be able to play backwards. It's the only sport in the world we ask people to do this in, is the offensive line play. Think about that for a second. There's no other sport you do that in. There's no other sport that you have to go back. Basketball, you got somebody to help with you. They're going to pass the ball off as you're working with them. But legitimately, basketball, you have the entire hardwood to be able to work with this guy. You don't have someone 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet behind you trying to execute this pass while somebody else that all they do is all this samurai stuff. They go the entire offseason, they go meet with jiu-jitsu guys and try to learn how to do this and bend and all these other things. realistically, it's been a really hard deal for Ohio State. But if they would have connected on that shot play yesterday to go up the insurmountable 2-score lead, and Ohio State wanted at that point of the game, now we're sitting here going, okay, it was the largest margin of victory against Nebraska, which it still was, but it's the largest margin of victory, style points, to be able to go hit Chris Olave in that situation. CJ Stroud throws for X amount of yards and touchdowns for the game. And now we're sitting here going, wow, we can really be excited about this. CJ had 400 and whatever yards it was. Aiden O'Donnell, the kid from Purdue last night, 535 yards against this Michigan State defense. I mean, this game again, this 3:30 start next week, maybe the longest game in the history of man. The Buckeyes instant analysis may be at like midnight after this thing's over, because these two teams are going to throw the ball over the yard. Hopefully the Buckeyes get back to running the football effectively and allow Ryan Day to be a little bit more balanced in his play calling.
Yeah, I agree on all those points. I want to talk about Steel Chambers for a moment, but first, this comment, Timothy, please hang around because we're going to get to this. Most of us Buckeye alumni watch Ohio State games with one eye being on the top 4, as in, how are we going to beat Bama and the Dogs, that mentality. It is concerning when Ohio State is not there yet. Few games left to grow and learn and mature. I wholeheartedly agree with you, and we are definitely going to get to that. So hang tight. Want to put a bow on maybe our thoughts from yesterday first before we kind of project forward here. You talked about Steel Chambers being such a critical component for this defense, and his humility with switching positions and frankly embracing it. He only played half the game yesterday because he got kicked out of last week's game for a targeting call. And he made 6 tackles. He had a tackle for loss. He just continues to look like a guy that has to be on the field. Like for me, when I'm thinking about, okay, it's a critical down, Ohio State's got to get a stop, whatever the situation is. Like, I'm at the point now where, for me, I don't want to say it's a non-starter because they're showing they've got some depth at linebacker. Mm-hmm. But man, I want Steel Chambers on the field when it really counts. I mean, it's really fun to watch a guy embrace a role that he was not recruited to play in and be excelling in that role and having it make an extremely meaningful impact on the team. I don't know how often that happens, but I think it's worth, individually acknowledging and appreciating.
Absolutely. I mean, anytime that anybody can take up that kind of role and have the ability to grow and to develop the group and play a position that they didn't play and really have the ability to not only play the position, but excel at the position, it's awesome. What he added instantly to that room was athleticism. That room desperately needed more athletes. He was able to add that to the room. He's been able to establish himself as a great player. And realistically, you look back at, I remember, Brendan, you and I talking about it when Dallas Gant left, when you're starting to sit there and go, this is supposed to be his season to be that athletic guy. Steel Chambers is a better athlete, and he's playing better. And it was kind of a gain by loss, if you will, for Ohio State. So to see that and to see the Buckeyes be able to do that early, it was really exciting for that standpoint. And I think going forward, you're going to continue to see, more players doing that for Ohio State.
If you have questions along the way, I know there's quite a few of you with us live. Feel free, drop them in the comments section. We'll try to answer as many as we can. We're going to start, maybe transitioning a little bit away from yesterday's game specifically and more to like what it means for Ohio State moving forward. Why don't we start with a very interesting question that I think Joel Klatt posed last night, and it kind of goes to what Timothy was starting to allude to. Joel said on Twitter,
excuse me,
who was more impressive, God bless you, who was more impressive in their win today, Ohio State or Alabama? He said one can't be survived while the other is a hard-fought win. And I thought that was a really interesting way to phrase it. He must have been reading that, some people said, hey, tough win versus, oh, they survived. I'm wondering if they both survived or if they both had hard-fought wins. You could make an argument that LSU's probably a better football team than Nebraska, but LSU, look, I guess Alabama did it on their home field against a team with a lame duck coaching staff that admittedly they still got a great effort out of, but it was pretty clear that LSU offensively, when it counted late in the game, they just didn't have it. I mean, it really was not well orchestrated late in the game. On the other side, the Buckeyes, look, I think you could fairly say they got lucky that Nebraska missed 2 field goals. Those are very makeable field goals that the Huskers missed. I think I'm a little bit more impressed with Ohio State's resolve, if I can say that, because I certainly don't feel that Alabama played its best football yesterday by any stretch. But this is the second week in a row where a very young Ohio State team, and I know people don't want to hear that, right? It's November. Freshmen they've played 2 months worth of football, fine. They're young in the sense that they haven't played in a road environment like they did yesterday. We brought this up in our post-game show. That was far and away the hardest road environment the Buckeyes have played in this year. We're 85,000 people. It was nuts. And you're playing against a hungry team that is sick and tired of losing by a touchdown or less. I just thought in a day where the Buckeyes didn't really control the line of scrimmage the way they needed to, and their offense became one-dimensional, I was impressed with Ohio State's grittiness and obviously their ability to rely on Noah Ruggles. I was also impressed with Alabama in holding off LSU. I didn't go to bed thinking last night, oh, gee, that was a lucky win for Alabama. I think I was less in the, hey, they survived category than, hey, I'm more of the, hey, that was a hard-fought win. But between the two, I think I was a little bit more impressed with Ohio State's win.
I would agree with you in that standpoint. The thing that you see yesterday in the Alabama-LSU game, LSU is playing with absolute reckless abandon right now. And that's a dangerous thing to see with a football team. They ran that fake punt early in the game, which was a great call. It was a great call. The punter runs up and they're going to run a wedge with 4th and 2. He throws the pop pass to the tight end that slips out, and they're able to go advance and get a first down. Ed Orgeron is a lovable person in that building. Those kids love Eddie O.
They love the Go Tigers. They love the way that he embraces them and tells them about the Rio and everything else that they do down there.
But as he does that and he goes forward with that, he also has this wired into those LSU kids' mind that this is their Super Bowl, playing Alabama every single year. If you remember the year they won the national title, they went and beat LSU. And most coaches, after you win a game, have enough composure to kind of go do a post-game interview. If you remember him on the field, he's sitting there. He's crying. Tears are running down his face.
We said we were going to beat these guys. We said we were better than them, and we were.
And he calls out Nick Saban and everything Nick Saban's done, which is kind of crazy. You beat somebody once, like, take a deep breath, take a step back. Those have been some great games over the years. I think that the Ohio State win yesterday was more impressive because Nebraska is still playing to keep their coach. LSU yesterday knew they've got a sitting duck. They're at the end of the presidency. There's not going to be a lot of legislation pushed forward. They know that Eddie O,
I've got 17 million reasons not to coach this team anymore. Somebody else's problem.
Like, Eddie O is going to go on a vacation with one of his 3 girlfriends after the season's over, and he's going to go and, quote unquote, enjoy his outside life.
Just going to disappear.
He's going to disappear. Exactly. He's not going to be on some TV telecast next year. If he is, he's very bored with the alone time that he has. Yesterday's Ohio State win was exciting to see because they were one-faceted offensively. Their defense stood up against a team that was number 2 offensively in the Big Ten, a team that moves the football up and down the field at will. They were able to fight, they were able to win, and they were able to rely on other people that aren't your traditional heroes. When football teams can do that during games, it's exciting to see. Yes, I am concerned that they have to figure out how to run the football these next 3 weeks, because if they're not able to run the football these next 3 weeks, we are not talking about a college football playoff. We're not even talking probably about a New Year's Six bowl game. We're hoping to see where the Buckeyes fall from that standpoint. It's interesting to see if Ohio State can really push themselves forward and learn how to run the football effectively. As I alluded to it yesterday, more gap scheme runs, counter, maybe getting into that 12 personnel that they did yesterday with Jeremy Ruckert and Cade Stover, and allowing Jeremy Ruckert to be the puller. Cade Stover's been the rooted tight end, playing the Y position. Ruckert's been the H, as we discussed yesterday when they were running that duo play down here in the goal line in the short yardage area. When you create extra gaps, teams have trouble defending the run. We also discussed the fact, C.J. Stroud, don't be afraid to take 5 yards when it's 2nd and 7 and you're going up the field and you're sitting there trying to be patient, let the Buckeyes live in 3rd and 2. Let the Buckeyes
I'm going to cut you off here for a second because CJ was asked about that again, probably 5 times post game about, some way, shape, or form. The question was about why are you not running the football when you can? It wasn't that direct, but it was, hey, are you seeing this, or should you do that, or do you think you want to do that, or whatever? And at one point he answered, he's like, man, I'm not a running back. I make a living throwing the ball. And I was just like, wow, that's a very that's a very firm answer. I think CJ's very mature, but I wonder if that's a little bit of an immature thought process, because I think there are absolutely instances where he could use his feet, slide and not get killed, and pick up 5 yards, and it could be really helpful. We're not talking about, hey, man, be Michael Vick and just be a running quarterback and, go crazy. He's athletic, man. Use your athleticism. That's part of what God gave you. Go do it. So, yeah, I thought it was very interesting. I almost might even say close-minded, the way he answered that question, where he straight out, he goes, I make a living throwing the football. I'm not a running back. I was like, okay.
Yeah, and to pull from our comments from an earlier podcast, we talked about this. One of our great followers said Tom Brady runs the football, and it's a great point. Tom Brady does run the football. Tom Brady takes off, he moves the football, he gets moving down the field, and people don't get upset when Tom Brady or Peyton Manning would take off and run the football. It's something that he's going to have to add into his arsenal to at least help everybody else. And that's a selfish response by him. And it's the first time, like you and I, Brendan, said, we commend this kid every week. We celebrate him. We celebrate his growth and maturity. But at some point or another, you do have to do that. And when you do that, you're going to allow this group to grow. You're going to allow them to be a little bit better from that from that perspective, and to watch this offense and watch this group grow. They're going to keep those guys at bay. And yesterday we discussed this in the run game. The way Nebraska defends the run is they add that extra nickel player into the box. And when they add that extra nickel player into the box, he lines up wherever the tight end's at. And when Ruckert went with it yesterday, they added him on to the edge of the line of scrimmage. And because Stroud turns his back to hand the football, he's not a rush, or he's not a threat to boot out or do anything. It adds an extra guy that the offensive line and the blocking scheme does not account for. And unless you're going to RPO him to death when you go from that area of the game and that perspective, you need to be able to, as an Ohio State offense, to look ourselves in the mirror and say, how are we going to account for this extra defender? Let's have CJ run. And they did with the speed option yesterday. They did it twice. It was good to see that, but it's going to be something going forward that they're going to have to do in their game planning to keep these other teams at bay when they're going ready to go attack them offensively.
Okay, I think we've hit enough on Ohio State's game, so let's transition a little bit more to the Big Ten, because we've certainly learned a lot about the Buckeyes the last couple weeks. I appreciate their toughness and their grittiness, and there was certainly a noticeable uptick in competition with Penn State's defense, who's one of the top 10 red zone defenses in the country, and Nebraska's defense played hungry yesterday. We've talked at length about a lot of different things related to the Buckeyes, including just 2 touchdowns and 6 field goals in their last 9 red zone trips. So let's move maybe to a bigger picture Big Ten here. Michigan State yesterday loses to Purdue, and frankly, lost convincingly. I don't know what it is about Purdue playing top 5 teams. Purdue as a program has more wins over top 5 teams when they're unranked than any program in college football history. And they've done it 3 times now in the last few years. They beat the Buckeyes a few years ago, and they've done it twice this year, winning at Iowa and now winning at home against Michigan State. The Buckeyes are not going to sleepwalk into this game after watching Purdue beat Michigan State. I can promise you that. Apparently, if you're if you lose to Bowling Green and Illinois in the same year, the way to treat your coach is to give him a 7-year contract extension, because that's what happens with Minnesota. Not a good performance yesterday from
Brendan. We called it. Brendan, we called it on Friday. We said the week that you get the contract extension, that means your head coach is negotiating things that has nothing to do with the game. And then you get a hungry Illinois team to come in there, and they punched them in the face just like they like to do to everybody else. And unfortunately, PJ Fleck's oars were not in the water by the time he was able to get going.
Yeah.
They fell on the mat.
So Minnesota loses. And now you've got 4 teams in the Big Ten West that are 4-2. Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, and Purdue. And many of those 4 teams still play each other here in the final 3 weeks of the regular season. The Big Ten West is wide open. Wide open. Wisconsin yesterday absolutely pounded Rutgers. Just blew them away. Best game we've seen Wisconsin play, and it's not even close. Iowa, I mean, fine, they won. Okay, they weren't as impressive yesterday, but I think they got their feet back underneath them a little bit. I wouldn't count the Iowa Hawkeyes out, but I am not pounding the table for Iowa the way I was a couple of weeks ago, thinking that they're going to run away with the West. All of a sudden, like that division in particular, never mind the fact that at the start of last week, you had 3 top 10 teams in the country in the other division in the Big Ten. But the Big Ten West right now, I think, is really, really fun. And frankly, Nebraska, even though they've got a crappy record, Nebraska could win several games down the stretch if they play like they did yesterday.
Wisconsin's the second hottest team in the Big Ten right now. They're on a 5-game winning streak. We went from calling them, oh, they're done. They got nothing. They lost to Notre Dame. Looking back at who they've lost to now, they've lost to Notre Dame, lost to a hot Penn State, or the Penn State team at the beginning of the season. Wisconsin's playing really good football. Purdue right now is sitting here going, this is our Super Bowl. We have to have the ability to go play Ohio State, go beat Ohio State. And if they can come away with this victory, they play Northwestern and they play Indiana for the bucket of nails, which is a great game. It's a great rivalry to decide who wins at Indiana, who's the best college football team in the Big Ten in Indiana. This Purdue team is dangerous this weekend going into this game. Part of the reason, I think, Brendan, you and I talked about this before, that you struggle going against Purdue, or reason team beat or lose to Purdue. Have you ever been to West Lafayette, Indiana? It makes Lincoln look like New York City. West Lafayette, Indiana, you roll into this town. Ross-Ade Stadium's this little quaint stadium. There's not a lot going on. And yesterday, that place was rocking for the Michigan State game. Michigan State gets in there. They go, all right, everyone stays at the same hotel when you go to West Lafayette and play there. It's this dingy, gross hotel. There's nothing special about it. You're going to have the same meal you eat every time you go into this. But then you're going to this Purdue game. There's nothing really exciting about it. And all of a sudden, what happens? You're in a dogfight, and you're looking up at that scoreboard in the north end zone that's just not really special. And you look up and you go, wow, we can potentially lose this game. You go get dressed in this little locker room they have. It's like a shoebox thing. I mean, it is a dingy, dark place to go. And credit, Joe Tiller's done it. Joe Tiller, the late, great Joe Tiller, did it for years. And then now Brian Brown's starting to, get the ability to do that. He's done it to Ohio State. Ohio State will be ready for this game. And what's going to be really fun to watch is to see kind of the X's and O's matchup. You have 2 great minds in Brian Brown as well as Ryan Day. We'll talk about that more. But this Big Ten West battle, I mean, to have this many teams at the top of the Big Ten West, it's almost like you're starting anew. It's a 3-game renegade playoff. It's almost like watching college, or when you watch baseball. When baseball kind of this time of the, at the end of the baseball season, this team's got to win. This team's got to win. Who's their 3-game series against? Who's their 3-game series against? You and I were sitting here offline looking at who these guys play. It's going to be an exciting Big Ten West battle down the stretch, as well as the Big Ten East. The Big Ten for years now, because of the quote unquote vulnerability of Ohio State. The Big Ten's a fun one to watch down the stretch here. And there's going to be a lot of great games, a lot of teams that are going to go play each other. And really the way that the Big Ten scheduling worked out, it made it really interesting to see a lot of these top teams going to play each other. Ohio State probably has the toughest slate out of anybody to play this Purdue team who has beaten a lot of great teams. Michigan State yesterday loses, but Michigan State's going to lick their wounds. They're going to get ready to come back. They run the football effectively with Kenneth Walker. They were showing that they can throw the football probably a little bit better than people anticipated yesterday. And then a Michigan football team who, is actually a really good team and really should have probably beat Michigan State. They had their opportunities, and it's going to be fun to watch to see, down the stretch, who's going to be able to win this Big Ten and be able to take over and be the one that is standing in Indianapolis ready to go. Brendan, you said it in the opener. I don't know who Ohio State, if they win out, play in Indianapolis. I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah.
There's teams in Indianapolis. There's teams these Big Ten West teams that have no idea whether or not they can be the team. Right now, Wisconsin's on a 5-game winning streak. Can Wisconsin be that team? Probably.
They could be.
I mean, the way they're playing defensively, offensively, they're starting to move the football forward.
Their defense is really good right now.
I mean, Jim Leonard, the whole time he's been there, and really, it's Jim Leonard learned from Dave Aranda. Dave Aranda went on and left and became the DC at LSU, where they were really good defensively there. He's taken over this Baylor team that was god awful during the pandemic. And yesterday, lost to TCU without Gary Patterson, which is another story for another day, but a 7-2 Baylor team right now. It's interesting to see what this Wisconsin defense could do these next 3 weeks and potentially, pose an issue for the Buckeyes, in Indianapolis, but we don't want to pull ahead of that, but it's going to be fun to watch.
I don't want to get off track, but I feel like I would be doing a disservice to those who like and appreciate good uniforms if I didn't point out that TCU's uniforms yesterday were atrocious.
Oh.
Those were awful. I don't know who was in charge and thought, hey, this is a great idea. Those were gross. Never wear those again.
Maybe that's why Gary Patterson resigned. He saw those uniforms.
Yeah,
they knew they were going to have to wear those that horned frog, red eye. And Gary Patterson goes, look, guys, you already got a statue built to me in this place. I ain't walking out of the tunnel with those guys doing that against Baylor on Fox. So it's on you guys. And he walked out. I don't know. I mean, it's
those were hideous. I'm starting to wonder if Jeff Brom is like maybe the most underappreciated coach in the Big Ten, because his team just seems to be ready to go in big games. I guess I don't remember off the top of my head, and maybe this is poorly researched on my part. I don't remember Purdue getting blown out in big games very often. They've certainly had some bad performances. There's a reason they're not like a perennial power in the Big Ten. But for his team, under his reign in particular, for that program to win against Ohio State and a number 2 Iowa team, and then to do what they did last night against a Heisman Trophy legitimate candidate and Kenneth Walker and Michigan State, there's something in the water there that he's got that team rolling. I wonder if we don't appreciate him enough, perhaps because the Buckeyes don't play Purdue enough. Or maybe it's a good thing they don't play Purdue that often. I don't know. I guess we're going to find out. But you're right. I mean, the schedule down the stretch here for Ohio State has to be as hard, if not harder, than anybody else in the conference, because you're playing 3 legit defenses and you're playing a great running back in 2 weeks with Kenneth Walker. This is a great question here. Do you think it was good or bad that Michigan State lost? And following up for us. We talked about the Z right before we jumped on air. I'm not sure how much movement there's going to be in the college football playoff rankings this week, because at the end of the day, Georgia did what Georgia does, and they embarrassed Missouri. Alabama won. It might not have been a huge eye-popping win, but they won. So Michigan State lost, right? Obviously. Oregon, it wasn't a great win, but a tough win against a team that, the Oregon and Washington rivalry is obviously a hated one. Ohio State won. Cincinnati, I mean, gosh, did they get lucky to win that game, but they won. Michigan did what they needed to do. I mean, I'm interested to see where Michigan State gets slotted. The answer to that question, do you think it was good or bad that Michigan State lost? I think you're asking that question in the context of, is it going to help or potentially hurt the Buckeyes' resume as they try to make the college football playoff? I would say that it's probably not a big deal, because at the moment they lost to a team who is going to be looked at favorably upon, because now they've got 2 wins, Purdue does, over top 5 teams. I just don't think the committee is going to say, oh, Michigan State lost to Purdue, they stink, they're overrated, and tank them in the polls. I wondered this with Z beforehand. I wonder how the committee is going to weigh Ohio State lost to a really good Oregon team versus Michigan State's loss isn't bad and they beat a really good Michigan team. Ohio State still doesn't have that win yet. in the eyes of the committee. They don't have that signature win. I don't think they think of Penn State as highly as maybe we do in the Big Ten. So where are they going to slot Michigan State based on the fact they beat Michigan? If Michigan State and Michigan are both one-loss teams and Michigan State beat Michigan, the poll last week would indicate, or I should say the rankings last week would indicate that the head-to-head matters, right? Oregon was ahead of Ohio State. Wisconsin was ahead of Iowa. I just kind of wonder how that's all going to shake out. I'd be surprised if Michigan State, does a nosedive in the rankings. I think they'll drop a couple spots, but I don't expect them to fall out of the top 10 for sure.
No, Michigan State should stay in the top 10. That loss yesterday hurts Ohio State in this regard. You wanted a Michigan State team to be undefeated when Ohio State beats them. Like you said, you want that. This Purdue game, Ohio State should win this weekend. I think they'll beat Purdue. I'm not trying to jump ahead of this, but Purdue, and I think someone talked about it, Purdue hasn't won since the 50s in Columbus. What you're going to see is this Purdue loss or this Purdue win this weekend. There it is. Stephen Marsh had it in 1952. But Purdue is not going to be looked at again as a good win. Ohio State's going to continue to get knocked for these wins against these Big Ten opponents because historically they've beaten these teams. If Ohio State had the resume of Illinois and played the season they're playing right now everybody goes, wow, look at these great wins. They go win these tough games. They go win these games going forward. They're not getting the credit that they deserve for these victories right now. You want Michigan to win out because you want Ohio State to go get that signature win. You wanted Michigan State to win out because it gives them another signature win. And now you get those two signature wins on the resume going forward to kind of push forward with the committee. Oregon took care of business yesterday. It wasn't pretty in Seattle. And this is the thing that you come back to. Ohio State's one loss is to what will be the number 3 team probably in the polls when the college football playoff comes out on Tuesday. That's their one loss.
Sure.
So if that's their one loss, where are you going to go and where are you going to take Ohio State in those rankings? And where are you going to put them?
I think you got to put them 4, right? You're not Cincinnati's not jumping the Buckeyes after yesterday. Right. I mean,
they were a fumble away against Tulsa from them going for 2.
Yeah.
And Tulsa, and we've talked about Tulsa. That's a great indicator. The Buckeyes Buckeyes weren't sitting there watching Tulsa try to dive into the end zone to go for 2. They didn't play well against Tulsa. But
and the Indiana game. Cincinnati played a tight game against Indiana. Ohio State embarrassed Indiana.
Yeah, I think that's where Cincinnati's kind of been sitting back. Maybe Cincinnati goes to 5. Maybe they jump ahead of Michigan State, there, and then Michigan State falls back a little bit more. Does an idle Oklahoma bump up into the top 6? Where is this committee going to go tomorrow or Tuesday rather when they put these guys together? But I do think that these next couple games are going to give Ohio State the ability to show who they are, and then really where it's going to come down to whether or not the Buckeyes get into the college football playoff is going to be who they play in the Big Ten championship game. And unfortunately, it's tough because I agree. Penn State is a good football team, and that would have been a signature win. Penn State stubbed their toe against Indiana or against Illinois. If they didn't stub their toe against Illinois, that loss to Iowa, the 3-point loss without Sean Clifford, it really now shows you that Penn State can be a team that would have given Ohio State that win that they really wanted. I'm with you. I think it's important that we see Ohio State go win these next 3 games and really win out, and they'll be fine. They'll get in the college football playoff. Where do they sit compared to Georgia and those other teams? I don't know yet. I don't know. I mean, Georgia's really talented. And I know, Brendan, you and I have talked about this off the air on the phone during the week. We were talking about how would you attack this Georgia defense, and nobody's really figured out how to know the other I know that we were talking about the shutout. Missouri did get the field goal early.
Georgia is allowing 6.6 points per game. They've played 9 games. They play in the SEC, guys. I know they haven't played all of the great teams in the SEC. They're literally allowing an average of less than a touchdown per game, and we are in November. That is absurd.
It's crazy. It'll be absolutely crazy going forward. So it'll be an interesting down the stretch how this plays out. But Ohio State's got to win. They've got to beat Purdue convincingly, and by convincingly, 2 scores, a touchdown and a field goal. If they can beat Purdue by a touchdown and a field goal tomorrow or on Saturday, Now you're starting to look at Ohio State and say, okay, this is right where they need to be. Then you have this Michigan State game that, is going to be a really, really fun one to watch. And then this Michigan game where it's just you throw everything out. It doesn't matter how good one team is or the other. It's just going to be the signature Ryan Days winning by 40 against Michigan. I don't think so. I think Michigan's defensive line is pretty talented, and I think they're going to be a team that Ohio State is going to be ready to go play against Ohio State. So it'll be fun to watch going down the stretch.
I think there's a lot of Ohio State fans that feel like this right now. Lynn's Breezy OH says, I hate to say this, but I'm not confident in any of our upcoming games. They appear to have regressed in almost every aspect except defense. Secondary is still leaving the field wide open. I don't know if I agree with the second half of that, but I think there are a lot of people that are pretty nervous about where this team is right now. I don't think it's so much of a regression as much as it is you're certainly seeing better defensive lines the last couple of weeks. And, we've talked about this a lot, but it almost feels like Ohio State has 4 offensive tackles and a center. And it's been tough on Thayer Munford and on Paris Johnson, who are exceptionally talented guys, like crazy, crazy talented players. It's been hard for them to be as effective inside because of their size. You just typically don't see guys that are that big playing on the inside. It's largely working, but there are moments where, it's been a little bit frustrating. And they've got to figure out a way to band together for this, this upcoming stretch. But I think there are a lot of fans that feel that way after some big, crazy blowout wins where for 4 games in a row, you averaged 58 points a game to a pair of white knuckler 9-point wins against Penn State and Nebraska that for the most part, you weren't really worried about losing the game, but it certainly wasn't a runaway dominating, slam dunk effort. And I think that it's kind of what a lot of fans are expecting. All right. One more. I saw one more fun question in here that I want to get to before we wrap up. It was specifically for you, Z. Let me see if I can find it. I think it was. Hold on. I don't want to not give proper credit to where it came from. Come on, where are you? It's good that we have so many comments in here. Oh, okay, I found it. It's from Yakov, who wants to know if – let's get this on screen here. Tommy, do you miss 6 a.m. lifting sessions?
Who doesn't miss a 6 a.m. lifting session? I mean, that's what it's all about. You're getting in there. You're getting in the squat rack. Guys are growing. They're developing. From that aspect of life, you learn a lot about a person when they put weight on their back. So 6 a.m. workouts and 6 a.m. lift sessions are the best. It starts your day off. It's better than any cup of coffee. The only thing that rivals it is maybe a little bit of scripture in the morning. You get your Holy Ghost high, you get your adrenaline rolling, and then you get that cup of coffee. And from that caffeination, you're ready to go. It caffeinates your knees, it caffeinates your back, it caffeinates your body, and you're ready to go attack anybody else. And I think when you see that, and I'm going to go on this little rant, when you get up and you lift in the morning, you stare someone in the eyes, no matter what you're doing that day, you look at them. Did they get better in the morning like you did? And I think that's important. Unfortunately, I had a torn pec and got away from those for a couple of years. And that's kind of the foundation you're seeing right now. But we're getting back after it and getting there in the mornings with my 10-month-old daughter, trying to put her, ready to go, make sure she's ready to go with my wife, and then getting in there and throwing some weight around.
I love it. 6 a.m. lift sessions are always fun. And frankly, that the energy in those sessions is hard to replicate because everybody has to embrace the suck of wanting to do that and do it on cold, harsh winter days. You've heard a little bit lately from some of the Buckeyes that they've referenced this during the week, especially Jeremy Ruckert. That winning a tight game or grinding out a victory is nothing compared to what Ohio State does in the days of in their words, where the foundation of this program really lies. The hard off-season days, the dog days at camp, days that are not particularly fun with Mickey Marotti, who just, grinds these guys like crazy in the weight room. It's part of why Ohio State's culture is what it is. It's built on toughness for sure. And so when you're in a tight game late, a lot easier to survive stuff like that.
Brendan, Mickey Mariotti's never been around a loser.
Yeah.
Never been around a loser. And that's why Ryan Day, the day he got that job, he went down to his office. First thing, are you staying? What do we have to do to keep you here in Columbus? Because he's so important in the foundation. It's the number 2 most important hire that athletic departments make when it comes to football. Who's your head football coach? Who's your strength coach? And the reason that strength coach is so important, he spends more time with the players than anybody else. When the coaches are out on the road recruiting and they're doing different things and they're meeting with this group or they're meeting with that group, who's allowed to be with the players? That strength coach and his staff. When those guys get it rolling, and Ohio State has some of the best in the country, they're lucky to have former players that have come back and work in that avenue. They've been really, really talented and really, really excessive by being able to take those players, sculpting those guys. And Jeremy Ruckert's one of those guys. Jeremy Ruckert played high school football in New York. No disrespect to high school football in New York. It is not the top. That's never in the rankings where people go, that's the best high school football. Jeremy Ruckert became a man because of the opportunities he's had at 6 a.m. and before that in the Woody. So when you go to see that and you go to see that manifest in victories on Saturdays, it's exciting for the Buckeyes.
We talked about a lot of stuff here, kind of what we learned from Ohio State over the last 24 hours. Touched a bit on the Big Ten picture and forecast a little bit what's coming. Certainly some big games this week. Ohio State with Purdue at home. You've got a huge contest between Michigan and Penn State. That's a game that Michigan absolutely has to be ready for because even though Penn State's record isn't great, the Nittany Lions absolutely have the talent and ability to knock off Michigan State. Minnesota, Iowa in Iowa City next weekend is a massive game. And I'm interested to see if Wisconsin can keep this thing rolling against Northwestern. You know, Northwestern, they have the last couple years, in fact, 2 of the last 3 now, they've been in the Big Ten championship game. And it feels like every opportunity for them to go out and compete on a Saturday, knowing they've got limited opportunities left, they're going to try to give it their best. And I'm never counting out a Pat Fitzgerald team. You want to talk about a guy that knows how to get after it. Pat Fitzgerald's a man. So can Northwestern give Minnesota a game? Can Northwestern give Wisconsin a game next weekend? Will be very interesting to watch as well. So some good Big Ten football coming up next week. In the meantime, the Buckeyes will enjoy a victory Sunday. They've won 7 in a row, 8-1 with 3 games to go, and still their hopes and dreams ahead of them with a college football playoff berth very much still in the picture. We'll find out on Tuesday night where the Buckeyes rank in this week's playoff rankings. That's it for what we learned. We hope you had fun. Thanks for joining us. We had great comments as well along the way. For Coach Tommy Zagorski, I'm Brendan Gulick. We'll see you real soon. Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated has you covered over on BuckeyesNow.com. And again, if you're new to the channel, we'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media. Cheers. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State
with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today.
Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here.
Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.